In this section, we'll look at Truman's surprising re-election in 1948. As the 1948 presidential election approached, Truman was clearly facing a lot of problems. For one, the Democratic Party was split, just like before FDR in the 1920s. The most ardent liberals, the hardcore liberals, they thought Truman was being too hard on the Soviet Union. He was reacting to the Republican attacks too much and was leading the U.S. into an unnecessary war. In 1948, these liberal rebels split from the Democratic Party and formed their own independent party, which they called the Progressive Party. They nominated Henry Wallace, who had served as FDR's vice president from 1941 to 1945. After Roosevelt made Truman his vice president in 1944, Roosevelt was given the position of Secretary of Commerce. But when Roosevelt died and Truman took over, Truman had fired Wallace, so Wallace was no great fan of Truman. Wallace and his progressives also demanded from Truman a more forceful liberal domestic agenda. Truman's Democratic Party had other problems in the 1948 election. Not only did the liberals leave the party for the Progressive Party, but many Southern conservatives also left and formed yet another third independent party, the Dixiecrat Party. As discussed in detail in the Civil Rights lecture, Truman had done much to embrace African American civil rights, which had ticked off many Southern conservative Democrats who might have agreed with him on many of his economic issues. In any event, the Dixiecrats nominated South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond to be their candidate in 1948. Not only were the Democrats divided in the 48 election, but the Republicans appeared to have successfully cultivated the moderate middle. The new Ohio Senator Robert Taft, who'd pushed the Taft-Hartley Act, was called Mr. Republican and was the champion of the hardcore right, the very conservative. But rather than nominate him, which might have ticked off moderates and independents, the Republicans nominated Thomas E. Dewey, governor of New York. Dewey, they assumed, had more personal appeal. Going into the 48 elections, all polls had Dewey in front of Truman and all the Democratic spin-off parties. When the election results came in, however, there was a huge political surprise, like perhaps none other in American history. Truman won with 303 electoral votes, or 49.5% of the popular vote, to Dewey's 189 electoral votes and 45.1% of the popular vote. Thurmond's Dixiecrat Party got 39 electoral votes and 2.4% of the popular vote, all from the South. Wallace's Progressive Party bombed with only 1 million votes nationally. He won no electors. So confident was everyone with Dewey's victory, a Chicago paper jumped the gun publishing a Dewey win headlines late the night before all the results were in. This picture of a victorious and happy Truman holding up the false newspaper headline is one of the most famous pictures in American political history. Looking back, in retrospect, there's several reasons why the election 48 was a surprise and Truman won re-election. Dewey ran a pretty complacent campaign. He was overconfident. And Truman, meanwhile, was working hard and attacking Dewey whenever he could. Give him hell, Harry, the Democrats said. Truman spoke over 350 times from a whistle-stop nationwide train tour. He attacked the Republican Party as the party of privilege. And indeed, Dewey seemed aloof and smug. Moreover, the Communists came out for the Progressive Party, which scared many Democrats and might have supported them back into the Truman's camp. Also, the Labor had been angry at Truman, but when Truman had vetoed unsuccessfully, ultimately, the Taft-Hartley Act, he'd re-won the organized labor's heart. You know, the Republicans were obviously the Antichrist to the unions with the Taft-Hartley Act, and so not surprisingly, looking back at least, the labor unions went for Truman in the 48 election. Also, I should note that Democrats won both houses of Congress in 1948, so Truman's second term looked a little brighter. This concludes the section on the surprise election of 1948.